Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Let's get started. Markets are closed today, so not much news. But we have Elias in here. If he wants to come and talk about FSD tracker, we can do that. Elias, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for joining. You're off today, you said?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. What do you have planned?
Just relaxing.
Just relaxing in Tesla Live. Well, I just want to kind of get an update on FSD tracker, see how things are going over there.
Yeah, I mean, over the last 3 weeks, the data's kind of died down. I think it started when 12.4.1 started going out. So people are just kind of waiting for the next release. And there's still some data flowing in, but it's slowed down a bit. But I mean, I think we have plenty of data on 12.3 to compare whenever we do start getting data for 12.4.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing, huh? Tens of thousands of miles added to 12.3.6. And it's been very stable too. Do you have enough testers from each of the biggest states like New York, California, Florida, Texas?
Yeah, I think 12.3 was the version that we had the most testers and also the most variety of data because it was coming from a lot of different states. I'd have to go back and look and see, but I want to say it was like 20 plus.
Which state is underrepresented? Where can we get you some testers?
I feel like we got a lot of people in California that said really be everywhere else.
Okay. Did you add any people from Florida? Last time I checked, I think that was really underrepresented.
Yeah, I think there was like one that came in, maybe two.
You said in the DMs, you said lane issues haven't been, they've been around for a while. They haven't been fixed yet, despite having lots of data. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so there've been a lot of fixes, including lane issues. I know there's a few spots that I've had where there were persistent issues with not getting over fast enough or drifting on into a different lane when it was supposed to keep going straight, the lane drift. So a lot of those have been fixed, but it's really some of the, I would say, like navigational type of issues or even just kind of stupid things that happen. For example, merging, there's still some issues with it not getting over fast enough. And then I've even had some weird ones where the car will drift to the edge of the line or even slightly over it, including over yellow lines. So the car is still not accounting for speed on curves in some cases, or even just it. I don't know what it's thinking when it does it, but I had one spot where it's a turn lane and it tries to drive into the shoulder of the turn lane instead of just staying in the turn lane. So it's just little weird issues like that that are probably just little bugs that have to get worked out.
What do you think is the holdup?
Some of it could be map space. I know some people saying that Teslas should prefer vision over maps, but I think in some cases maps could probably help them, and they have a lot of sensors, if you will, on the cars, and so they could have people collecting data on speed limit signs as one example. There's a lot of areas where I can't use the auto speed limit because it will drive 25 and a 45 or 45 and a 65. And so I have to use the manual limit where I can set it myself. So there's little issues like that you could probably easily correct with vision, collecting data on speed limits and lane markings and even like turn lanes of where the boundaries are. I think it's just a lot of little issues that exist because of bad map data. and so they either have to correct it or prioritize vision in some cases over it. But I think in some cases you're still going to need some kind of collection of map data for speed limits and things like that, because it needs to know where it needs to adjust speed to slow down or increase speed, because otherwise we're just, like I said, if you're going 45 and a 65, people are going to be honking at you. It could even cause an accident if someone's speeding well over that. So it just needs to be able to adjust for those situations.
Thank you. Dallas Tesla Club, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, this relates exactly what just happened to me. I just got back to the office. I tried to Chuck Cook style left turn, if you will, which usually worked pretty well. But in this case, first time in a while, I mean, the car literally drove straight at the median on the left side. And I had to evasively take the wheel back. And I mean, that would have been front left tire over median for sure, if not back right, or back left as well. So I don't know if that's map data, but it was one of the more scary, would have had some damage to the wheel situation. So just want to throw that in there.
Chansu, how is FS2 doing for you? Are you seeing these issues?
No, for me, it's been fantastic. Over the weekend, 0 issues, parking lot to parking lot.
0 issues, 0 interventions?
Yep.
Okay, Dallas, I know you just had a bad intervention, but generally speaking, what's the accuracy like for FSD for you?
12.3.6 has been unbelievable. I've converted a lot of non-believers in the past couple weeks, including my wife and my parents and in-laws, etc. I've gotten people in the vehicle who would never trust a machine to drive them to look at me and go, okay, this is really getting good. And that's what was so weird about this intervention. I mean, for weeks I haven't really had to intervene at all. So was just curious if you guys think that's a map issue or what. It just kind of put a bad taste in my mouth because it's been so good for the past couple weeks.
Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing good.
We have Elias on the board. We have Dallas Tesla Club, who just had a bad intervention, he says. And he replied to the space and described, he said, just wrapped up on an FST drive and had a bad intervention. Car tried to drive at corner of the median while attempting to make a Chuck Cook style left turn. One of the more obvious, if I wouldn't have intervened, could have been bad moments. So it's not perfect, obviously. And we're still waiting for 12.4.1 or .2. Hasn't yet gone out. How is it doing for you?
Well, it's doing pretty good. Almost every drive is 0 intervention. I, posted a video today of just getting lunch with my dad and and somebody, and it was 0 intervention, parking spot to parking spot. Then the drive after that, which I had this afternoon, had a couple of interventions getting out of the parking lot. And then I also had one takeover when this truck just tried to change lanes right on top of me, and the car stopped, but it was kind of like a weird situation. I wanted to just take over myself. So overall, pretty good. Obviously it's important to remember that although the system's very good and very human-like, it still can have interventions, including critical safety interventions. If it didn't, then it would be driverless by now, right? The reason we have to supervise is because the software is still imperfect. It can still make mistakes. And, almost driving into a median, I wouldn't even call that a bad mistake. I would call that maybe a medium mistake. A bad mistake is, to me, is there's a group of kids crossing the street and it starts accelerating into them and you have to hit the brake really fast or something. That I would call that a bad mistake. And, it can make bad mistakes too. Serious mistakes where you could get in a serious crash or maybe hurt somebody else. So definitely, important to supervise, be aware, but the number of interventions, they're just getting incredibly fleeting in 12.4. And even the few interventions that I did have in my latest video that I'm going to publish this afternoon, none of them were safety critical. They were all cases where the car just stopped and I was able to take over. It wasn't like I had to take over quick to avoid an accident. The car just stopped and I could then take over in reverse or do whatever I needed to do to get the car back on track. So I think we're trending in the right direction. I think 12.4 is another big leap forward, but you definitely obviously do need to supervise it.
Okay, good. Now, just a quick announcement. The space is getting more and more popular almost daily now. And therefore, we're getting a lot of requests to speak from people I haven't seen before. So I can't accept everybody. One way to kind of jump ahead is to reply to the space with a good question or an insightful comment. And I'm monitoring the replies. If I see anything insightful, good question that we should discuss, I will send you an invite. So if I'm not accepting your request to speak, try that instead. Okay. Dallas, go ahead.
I totally agree with what Omar just said. I think for the most part, the only interventions I really have are, that's not a straight lane, that's a left turn lane, or, minor stuff that I wouldn't even consider a safety hazard. It's more so just incorrectly selecting or deciding to do something that wouldn't put me at risk. It's just not the right way to go about getting myself to that destination. So I just felt like that was pertinent to add there.
Good.
Yeah, I did yesterday see, or 2 days ago, see incorrect lane. It got into an incorrect lane and had to go the wrong way, but it then corrected itself without any intervention. There are minor things it does here and there. Uh, it was going around a garbage truck and it waited a little bit too long, which was a little bit scary. So, like, there are some minor things like that still, even with 12.4. But like I said, it's trending in a pretty good direction. I don't think Elon's bullshitting when he talks about the rate of miles per intervention increasing exponentially, because they're just knocking out more and more of these problems, even long-standing problems that I've had for a long time. And as they do, each of the interventions they're focusing on are more and more rare events. So it's easy to see how this new model with the end-to-end training can actually lead to a miles per intervention increase that's exponential. And I believe that we're actually starting to see the first few data points of that. So I think 11.4.2, which is going to go out this week, is going to really be probably one of the best updates we've ever gotten, just because of obviously the no nag. But the driving model is like so smooth, it's incredible. It just occurred to me while I was driving yesterday that this thing is so natural that the passengers are comfortable and nobody around us suspects that this thing is driving itself at all. It can mask itself as a human very convincingly.
Okay, great. Elias, is there anything we can do for you to, further develop TeslaFSDTracker.com? I think it's a great tool. I think that if people are using FSD quite a bit, reach out to Elias, who's on the speaker board right now. Sign up for that website and submit your data so we can get more diverse data that's reliable. Elias, is there anything we can do for you?
No, I think we're all just waiting for the next release. So once that picks up, and then we can start, kind of re-engaging, getting that data collected.
Okay, thank you. Omar, let's switch to Optimus. I was listening to the presentation again. I pinned at the top Elon's segment where he estimates $30 trillion of market cap. He goes through the math in that video, kind of rough back of the envelope estimates. What did you think of it when he ran through that numbers? I know you were watching live. And what risks do you see to that valuation?
Well, I mean, on one hand, it's a little bit silly. On the other hand, I think he's actually sort of underestimating it. So, obviously, when you're kind of envisioning a market far out into the future like this, there's so many assumptions you have to make that you can't really assign any credibility to a back of the envelope math like this. So, maybe the size of the market is, let's say the size of the market's 25 trillion. What percentage of that is Tesla going to capture? He has an expectation of what share of the market he thinks Tesla can capture. If Tesla is the best, then they could capture a lot of that. If they are more of a commodity, which seems to be like kind of the trend of technology, it tends to commoditize over time, then the market structure might look very different. So, and what does a robot cost? Does it cost $10,000? Does the price go down over time? Does it go up over time? There's a lot of different variables in play. So what I take from this is he's just doing some back of the envelope math, and he says if every person on earth needs a robot, then the market's going to be big, right? And I think that assumption is probably correct. But if you really dig into how he's calculating this, when he talks about, okay, we think we can make this for $10,000 and we think we can sell it for $20,000, which is obviously, numbers he kind of pulled out of his ass. It's not going to be those round numbers. But again, this is just back of the envelope math. But then he said that we're actually going to rent the robots hourly rather than sell them initially. So if this becomes the dominant model where you actually have some type of hourly wage structure or something like that, then the value you capture could be greater than the cost of the bot by several orders of magnitude, right? So let's say the bot can make $200,000 a year, right? It can work 24/7 practically. It can be an expert in a number of different tasks. It can be a great plumber. It can be a great electrician. It can do all these different things. It can clean your house. So, just let's throw it out there. Let's say it can make $200,000 a year. And Tesla, through the Tesla network, is collecting 30% of that, right? Apple, they've got their infamous Apple tax, where they take 30% of all the revenue on their platform. That's because they provide the software, they provide the SDKs that allow people to build those apps. So they're saying, okay, we're going to take a percentage of your revenue in exchange for providing these sort of frameworks and services to you that allow you to develop your applications. And similarly here, you need the AI software to continue being developed, continue being improved. So there's an argument to have the structure be less of a one-time purchase. I mean, I think probably there will be options like that for business where they can just buy it all outright, but it's going to obviously be much more expensive than paying hourly. But if the dominant model is actually paying hourly, then you know a Tesla bot could actually produce income that's an order of magnitude greater than the $20,000 selling price that he's speculating for over its lifetime. Um, so, obviously, it's a bit far out to come up with an exact valuation or take it that seriously, but I think there's a consensus among the industry that we're looking at the birth of a huge, huge consumer market with AI robots, and that this is kind of almost like a personal computer or a mobile phone situation where you have this new product that pretty much every household and business is going to have maybe several of them. Um, but we don't actually know how to make that product today, right? It's kind of like when you're imagining a pocket computer, but we don't quite have the technology to make the iPhone yet. So there's a lot of breakthroughs in AI needed to have a robot that works in your home or in your factory without causing chaos and knocking over your furniture and kicking your kid in the face and so on and so forth.
Grant, what do you think about this valuation?
I mean, I think it's pretty insane. I could go on, but high level, I mean, what's interesting to me is that there's never been a greater difference between the bulls and bears in terms of looking at the results and the numbers on paper today versus these far off promises of new technologies. I mean, it's the business on paper today is just doing horrible objectively. So it's really up to individuals to decide if they want to believe these promises of products that don't exist yet that someday could be worth trillions and trillions of dollars or not. It's just crazy to me that so many people choose to believe Elon at this point when we're a decade into these promises. That's just my take.
Omar, what do you say to people who say, Elon has been making a lot of promises, master plan after master plan, but the master plan 2 hasn't been finished. Master plan 3 has barely been started, and there's number 4 coming now, probably going to be around Optimus mostly. Grant says that they're never going to hit these valuations, never going to hit those assumptions that he said on the stage.
I mean, I agree. He has been making a lot of promises. He promised that you'd be able to send money over the internet. That company is now PayPal. It's a global internet financial giant to this day. He promised that they'd get to orbit. People said, "You're fucking nuts." They have now launching astronauts into the United States, the biggest rocket that's ever flown. And the very same Tesla bears said, "You can't make an EV popular. Nobody wants an EV. You'll never be able to get this thing profitable." And look what they did. Now, the same guys who said you'll never be able to start a profitable EV business now say that the company is doing horrible, even though they're continuing to post a profit despite huge headwinds in the global economy and oversupply of EVs and batteries globally, especially in China, as well as a rate environment in the United States that is prohibitive to selecting a higher priced electric car. So, you know, it's a little bit of the moving of the goalpost there. You said the company would never be profitable. Now they are one of the largest automakers in the world, making millions of units. They continue to be profitable. They are continuing to invest in really groundbreaking technologies like FSD that are disrupting the industry. And yet people still say they're doing horrible. And that his next idea as well, now he's really lost it. Okay, some of those other ideas, they worked, but now he's really lost it. I mean, people have been laughing at this guy since day one. And maybe, he's right. I mean, not everything always works out. But there's a reason why people listen when he says this crazy stuff. It's because he has a track record of making it real.
All right, just as a reminder, please no cursing in the space because it demonetizes the YouTube channel for the episode. And Grant, I blame you for Omar's cursing because of the points that you made that got me really mad. Okay.
We should maybe look into some live bleeping technology for the space. I'll see if I can whip something up for you.
Yeah. And then the other thing, this space is being live streamed on YouTube as well. And on YouTube, there's a live chat function. You can join the live chat. Sometimes, people have this conversation in the background while this conversation is going on. Sometimes they talk about other things about Tesla. And there's some really cool people in there right now. If you want to join, it's through the link at the top of our screens. Machine.
What?
One more thing. Thank you to Nicholas and Sam for signing up for Patreon. Nicholas and Sam, thank you for signing up for Patreon. And that link is at the top of your screens as well. Mashi, do you want to talk about used vehicle prices or do you want to talk about this Optimus valuation first? Let's talk about Optimus valuation. What do you think about the $30 trillion market cap that Elon estimated on stage, primarily due to Optimus?
On first glance, I would say that's a bit over optimistic on first glance when you look at the number of people in the workforce worldwide. And if you're trying to replace those people, you wouldn't need as many bots per year. But I accept the idea of induced demand, that if you have cheap labor, cheaper than humans, it opens up opportunities to scale up and increase the amount of workforce you need. And past that, to estimate exactly how many bots there's going to be demand for is, I don't know. That's very difficult. So this is a huge fat tail probability estimation that people are doing. I think we can all agree that if you had a successful robot that you can produce for $10,000. There's so much money to be made from an investment standpoint. Even if the likelihood of it being successful was 5% or 10%, the expected value at current present share price means it's a huge buy.
Yeah, you're talking about replacing workers, but that's not what Elon based his estimates on. He talked about every person on Earth will have at least one, maybe two Optimus. So he's talking more about kind of like a system sort of thing, not necessarily replacing, even though he did mention industrial production. That's not his primary focus, I don't think. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I haven't done the math. I guess I've just been following what other people are saying, and they're trying to estimate back for that 20 or $50 trillion value, how many you produce a year, and people are coming up with 1 billion. I don't know if that's correct. Maybe you need less, because if you had 1 billion a year, then obviously that's more than, or it just takes a few years for everyone to have one. But maybe you only need to do a few hundreds of million or something a year to reach that value. I haven't done the math. You can tell me.
Yeah, you should do the math. Doing the math is a prerequisite for this conversation. Omar, I got a question today. I know math is not your strong suit, but Omar, I had a question today that said Elon was assuming 50% margin, given that a lot of companies will be producing humanoids in the future. Do you think Tesla will be able to charge 50% margin?
Yeah, I mean, I see the hourly business model as really being the business model that they go with ultimately. Selling in full will probably be a minority, and the price of selling the robot would have to be pretty high to equalize to the opportunity of, renting it out hourly or taking a cut there. So, I think on an hourly model, they could potentially see gross margins above 70%. So, I mean, like, I wouldn't put too much on this valuation. He's just kind of throwing numbers out there. It sounds a little bit ridiculous, but the question really is when. Okay, you think this is a $30 trillion market? Are we talking 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? Right? That matters a lot. If you just wait long enough, I think, the global economy will get pretty big. I did some Googling, and I think some people have estimated the global labor market at about uh, $61 trillion today. So, you imagine a world where there's low cost robots that can match the skills of humans, GDP would probably be much higher than today. So, I don't think saying that there's a TAM for a humanoid robot of $30 trillion at some point, maybe 10 years down the line or something like that, where they can actually do most of what a human can do. It's actually not that crazy to say that, the global market for robots could be trillions and trillions of dollars using the labor market as a guide. But again, the question really is just when is the software and AI good enough to actually replace a human? Today, we don't even have the robot hardware finished and selling at a decent price, let alone the software able to match human performance.
Grant, would you like to argue the other side as a bear?
Sure. I want to briefly just go back to what Omar said earlier. I just want to highlight that on the promises that Elon makes, I do think that autonomy is something he's identified as the difference between the company being worth a lot of money versus nothing. I think at the end of the day, that's the core promise that is worth focusing on. That's the one that's been in, process for a decade. And that's one that I think a lot of bears have some, well-deserved misgivings about at this point. But on the, Optimus at this point, I think it's tough, right? Like if they could get a $10,000 robot, yeah, I agree. There's a big market for it. I would definitely point out that if you look at the makeup of the world's population, there's only a small portion of it that could actually shell out $10,000 for a robot. Like, I don't know, there's probably like 20%, like right off the bat, that market gets smaller. And then I think it's also
Less than that.
Yeah, I don't know what the number is. I mean, if you put it to industrial use cases, I think it could be, I don't know. I don't have the numbers, but I mean, global GDP per capita is something like 20K. So yeah, there are a lot of people that can't afford a robot. I don't really agree with the idea that anywhere in the next 2 to 3 decades, we're going to have like a billion of these things running around. But could be wrong. And then I'd also just remember that this is going to be a competitive market. There are a ton of people that are making strides in this space. It's not like Tesla is going to own the entire market. So I think you need to look at global population, and before you start slapping like a 1x robots per person, 2x robots per person, you need to immediately scope it by, a fifth for who might
But he
actually.
did say 10% market share.
Sorry?
He assumed 10% market share for Tesla Optimus.
No, I mean, you could do 30%, but I mean, it's also, given that it would be a competitive market, I think it's worth assigning a gross margin similar to what you might see in the car business. Like, it's just not going to be generating $1 trillion.
Well, Tesla does have the lowest COGS per unit on the EV phones.
Is that still true? I think that was true.
Yeah,
too.
well, that's true. Everybody else is like double, triple machine.
Wow. I mean, I think Grant just turned into a bull.
I know he's about to buy
market
shares.
share of
He's like
Optimus?
he's like buying call options right now.
Yeah, I think he is. Grant.
This is what happens if you stick around. This is my problem. I want to have bull bear conversations, but then when people come up and learn a few things here, they turn bullish. Now I have to develop new bears. Grant?
Well, I mean, the point is, I was giving you guys 30%. Go ahead and slap 50% on it. It's not worth anything approaching $30 trillion. That's just insane.
Oh, Alexander.
Yeah, I can be bearish if you want to stir up some stuff. But I think regarding Optimus and margins, I think in the short term for industry it can be high. I mean, similar solutions for automation is like between 80,000 to 120,000 K maybe. So if they can solve that in the short term, they can earn a lot of money on it, even if they produce it for like 20,000-30,000, I think.
Omar. And now we're going to switch to data center construction after Omar.
Yeah, I agree with Grant that not many people have $10,000. I mean, your average American doesn't even have a few $1,000s for an emergency. So there's going to be a very small number of people, mostly businesses, that are going to pay 10,000 plus for a robot. The Boston Dynamics spot is at about 75,000. Actually, the price they were talking about selling at was 20,000. So that's obviously very high. They obviously are probably mostly going to be selling to businesses at that price. But on the other hand, if the robot has economic value, so let's say you spend a few $100s on babysitting a month, right? Well, the robot, if it could be a good babysitter, if it could keep your kid safe just as well as a human babysitter, maybe even better because it doesn't get distracted, then maybe, that saves you some money. If it can cook you food at home and save you money on food or takeout or give you some extra time to work some more hours, then maybe there's a justification there, and maybe banks would come in and finance it and say, okay, we can repossess this robot and have it go work for us if this person doesn't pay for it or doesn't have enough income coming in to cover it. So I think really the hourly model will probably be more attractive to people. It kind of simplifies things. They don't have to go borrow $20,000 or worry about financing or anything like that.
Sierra has a reply that I want to read out real quick. Regarding robot affordability, let's not underestimate the power, potential feasibility of financing options. 10K tax, not super attainable for most. 10K finance over 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. Much more attainable for the general population. Good point. All right. we're going to continue with Optimus discussion. I want to emphasize Optimus more and more going forward. I think it's going to be very central to the companies. Like, rather than talking about quarterly production deliveries figures or 1-2% differences in gross margin from quarter to quarter, I think this is much more important. Grant?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This product doesn't exist. I think if you want to talk about Tesla, you should be talking about the business as it exists today. I understand the desire of bulls to shift the focus to these promises that are way off in the future. But I think the business is basically on fire at this moment. And it's crazy to say that stuff doesn't matter.
Well, when you do discounted cash flow analysis and you forecast out future cash flows, you discount them back with the appropriate discount rates, you realize most of the value of present value is going to be due to Optimus. This is what Elon said a couple of years ago. He said on stage last week. And so, I guess it's a preference of an investor. There are different investment styles. You can focus on shorter term. You can focus on longer term. It's up to you. Just don't short the stock short term and then get caught with their shorts down when Optimus arrives. Omar, the machine that Grant.
Yeah, I understand the perspective of bears like Grant that there's all these broken promises and full self-driving has been a broken promise. But for customers like me, the software is actually driving us around all day. Like more of my driving is now done by that software than me actually manually moving the controls. So from my perspective, it's not a broken promise. He said, we're going to deliver this to you. I've now been using it for years and it keeps getting better and better. And this is why I think a lot of people take Optimus seriously, even though, as you say, yes, it doesn't exist. It's really just a few videos we've seen of what's going on inside their lab there. But given that they've been able to produce a software that is this reliable against, pretty much anything you can throw at it, you can use it anywhere across North America. We haven't seen anything like that in self-driving, taking it to this level of reliability. And that really gives me reason to look at the Optimus team and take what they're doing pretty seriously. They have great in-house silicon, great manufacturing ability, and the track record with their FSD software is really honestly something that you've seen very few AI systems take it to that level of reliability and scale. So there's a lot of reason to think that the Tesla AI team could have a pretty impactful product, if not the best product on the market in the humanoid category.
Grant and the machine.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I was talking about L4 autonomy, not driver assistance systems, but I get that it's a cool product. I do want to toss out an exciting opportunity for any Tesla bulls in this space. I do have a teleportation device startup available at a $20 million pre-money valuation. DM me for details. If you do the work that Iman's doing with a DCF forecast cash flow, you're going to find that the opportunity here far exceeds anything available to Tesla at the present moment with the present valuation. So, let's talk.
Has your team started any other successful businesses in the past?
I'll get back to you on it. Look, this is life-changing, earth-shattering tech, guys. Like, let's get excited about these things that don't exist yet, but hold the promise of changing the world, right?
Machine.
That was pretty good, Grant. I think everyone has a point on both sides. I think you do, for a long-term investor, need to properly model out the expectations of these potential big funded, big picture, big value things out in the future. The problem is the assigning of a probability to it is very difficult. You need to assign a probability. You don't just say, oh, we're going to have $10 trillion of profit from Optimus in 10 years from now. Let's DCF backwards with a 10% discount rate. And what do you get? Oh, I get a really big number. No, you have to assign the probability that that's actually going to happen. And that's something that's very hard to do and very volatile. And in between different investors is obviously going to hugely change. You see Grant looks at it and says, there's no way I'm going to give that a high probability now. I'm going to give it like 0.1%. And maybe, Yaman, you want to give it a 50%. And so obviously you're going to get...
Dude, there's no such thing as assigning probability in a discount cash
No,
flow
you
analysis.
should. Right. That's because
there is
economics people... Yeah, I understand.
May I? No, you don't. You adjust the discount rate to account for it. You don't like, or you can do sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis kind of stuff. You don't like actually assign a probability.
I can't help you with the fact that you don't understand statistical estimation like I do, but that's what you're supposed to do for estimating future potential returns.
How many DCFs have you built?
I've built a few, and they're just not that interesting.
From an empty Excel spreadsheet, how many have you built?
From Excel, I've done like 2 or 3.
Bull.
This is so useless. This is simple math. You know, and you got Kathy Wood, just an example, where you say, hey, I assume this many robotaxis by 2029, and you know, that's, and then what do we get? A huge value, and that's my base case.
Okay. Grant?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually pretty reasonable to do different scenarios and kind of look at the different probabilities. I think Adam Jonas does that, right? Like he'll kind of lay out the different possibilities. I'm not actually used to seeing people try to factor probabilities via the discount rate, to be honest.
Go back to school, Yaman.
I've done more DCS than all of the combined. I don't think Grant does any DCS.
I bet in 2016 you did a tell me the truth right now. In 2016 you did a DCF for Tesla that said we'd be generating robotaxi revenue already by now. Did you not?
Yeah. Yeah, although I assumed an extremely slow ramp. So it would be immaterial for the next few years. You can go back to my DCF, which is published.
And they generated $3 billion on ADAS last year.
Yeah. Texas Cyberbull.
Yes, I just wanted to bring up the point that I think Grant started this whole conversation by saying there's never really been a situation where so many bulls were buying into dreams. And, you know, but for long-term Tesla investors, this is like, you know, deja vu. In 2018, Elon talked about Tesla someday being worth over $600 billion. That's what his bonus plan was based on. People like Kathy Wood were talking about the stock being worth over $2,000 a share, and everybody thought she was crazy, and it's all happened. So it's totally the opposite of we've never been in this situation before. We've been in this situation before, and the people that believed in Elon made a ton of money. So I'm not sure why he would say we've never been in this situation before.
Grant?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an important distinction. It's great that the stock price did what Elon said it was going to do, but unfortunately, the cars do not do what he said they were gonna do from an autonomy perspective. So, like, it's fantastic that the stock went way up and it's kind of down now, but I'm really talking about, you know, rubber hitting the road, actual results, robo-taxis, technology, L4, all of that stuff, and that has not happened.
Well, in 2018, he wasn't really talking about autonomy. He was talking about, you know, Model 3 being a big success. And at that time, you know, he was having to sleep on the factory floor and people were talking about Tesla going bankrupt. I mean, that's what he was talking about at that time.
Okay.
And it turned out
he was
right.
Elon was talking about robotaxis in 2018.
No, but I mean, he wasn't talking about the valuation of the company being worth $600 billion because of robotaxi. He was talking about car sales.
Christine and Alexander.
And I don't believe he ever indicated that just as a car company, they'd be worth $600 billion. I don't know if he gave a valuation. just based on a car company. But the situation is different in 2018 versus now, not because of any difference in robotaxi hype, but in the difference in terms of the automotive business and the gross margins and the growth that was happening in 2018, that they just had to get operational leverage to start accruing better earnings. And now that part of the business is flat at best. And we're really relying just on Robotaxi and Optimus, which is all the far out stuff. And that's what gives some investors who have at least some more short term mind some pause, because they're seeing that part of the business, the more highly likely part of the business, not doing as well. So I don't see it being the same as 2018.
Magic.
Hey, going back to that point about manufacturing, 2018 and ramping up the Model 3. So I think at that point, it wasn't that out of the question to actually manufacture a car, because there's many millions of cars that are manufactured every day. I think this is way different because we're talking about manufacturing a humanoid robot that hasn't been done. So I think the probabilities are just much lower for a humanoid robot, since there isn't a comparative example of that, right? So I think the probabilities here are much lower, and it's a much harder task to create a humanoid robot compared to a vehicle.
Machine.
No, Magic. Didn't you hear? Probabilities don't matter. It's 100% certainty.
I didn't say that. Relax. I didn't say that. But let me ask you this. What do you think is the probability of Tesla producing Optimus in high volume production, let's say millions per year, in the next 10 years?
I would give it probably 70% chance.
Okay, Omar, what do you think? Probability of Tesla producing Optimus in the millions per year range, sometime in the next 10 years.
Millions a year?
Yeah.
70% maybe.
Okay. Did you just copy Machine's answer?
No, I wasn't listening to him.
Okay, how do you feel about Omar not listening to you?
Well, it's par for the course. The charlatan, he's always copied my content on X. Whenever I post something, he does one of those people who doesn't retweet it. He copies it, the image, and then tweets the image. And I find that behavior disgusting. And I equally find it disgusting that he took my exact do we really think we have the same probability on this? It's not possible.
Yeah, I was gonna say, 70, 75%. My reasoning for that is, 10 years is a long time. Elon doesn't give up on these crazy ideas. When he says we're gonna do something, they tend to do it. They're already deep into this. You can see from the videos, they've gone deep on the hardware, on the software, on the training infrastructure. They're making millions of cars today. This is going to be a market that exists. Can they make millions of robots if they set their mind out to it? I think they can. And, really, I think that they're the closest to any company on earth on really launching a generalized robotaxi service. The bears may say, oh, this is a big failure, but again, when you're seeing it just do multiple zero intervention drives in a row, hands free, parking spot to parking spot, this is something that nobody else can do across the country in a generalized way. So I think they're dancing on the graves a little bit too early here. It really does look like they're going to have, I think, a dominant position in the robotaxi and rideshare market. I mean, in a couple months, in 50 days, they're unveiling a vehicle with no controls at their 8.8 event. So I think that's actually going to give them a huge leg up in robots as well. Like you think about really the product of robotaxi, and there are a lot of use cases where you actually need a robot. For example, bringing food delivery to the door and stuff like that. So I think it's a natural complement to the rideshare product that's already starting to emerge as really something that's much more serious than Grant seems to imply.
Randolph,
Oh yes, thanks for having me. I wanted to mention like 10 years is a pretty tight time window. They have to build out all the plants. It's not as though they can retrofit their factories that are currently pumping out cars to pump out taxis. They have to buy all new plant and train all new workers. So I think the time window for rolling out millions of robots has got to be like as long as it took for Tesla to roll out millions of cars.
machine.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, if you look at something like Giga Shanghai, I mean, they were able to ramp this thing up to 500,000, I believe, in like a year or something, run rate, or less than 2. And that's for a big size vehicle. This Optimus is like 5 foot tall, 120 pounds, basically the size of your mom. Much easier.
Alexander.
Yeah, I remember in 2019, I think it was, when Elon told us, "Oh, your car will be increasing assets. You will earn money on your Tesla." And I hear the same stuff now, and I'm a bit skeptic, I must say.
Machine.
Pratar du svenska eller dansk?
Svenska.
Alexander, what did he say? Did he
I
correct
said
you?
I speak Swedish. That's what I said.
What did machine say?
He said, "Do you speak Swedish?"
Omar.
So Tesla started production of the Model 3 in 2017, 2018. In 2021, they delivered close to 1 million units for the first time. In 2022, they delivered over 1 million units for the first time. So I think, it really only took them a few years for cars. I think robots should be simpler than cars, probably less parts, less size, obviously, and not as stringent safety standards in terms of what regulations require. So I don't think it's inconceivable that they could ramp production to millions of robots within a few years, especially given that they now have this huge Austin Gigafactory with tons of space.
Machine.
I want to ask about a probability of something a little more important. What is the probability that Tesla figures out the DBE process in the next 2 years?
He seemed, he seemed committed on stage to 4680. He did admit that it's taking more time. It's a hard process, but Tesla is committed to 4680. Or did you take something else out of his part on that?
No, I believe they're committed to it, and I believe outside of DBE, I'm imagining most of the process they've figured out. Like I think that's the big bottleneck and cost bottleneck, and they're lucky that they can import I believe it's the cathode material externally. The anode, I think they're doing DBE on, so I assume that's successful. So it's just a cost aspect, right? The whole point with DBE, it was going to provide some benefits from, I believe, energy density, and maybe recharge rate because of the structure of the lithium and the crystals. But outside of that, it was more, you don't have to spend as much capex, you don't need as much land versus the wet process. So I don't know. I'd like if it's still going to be competitive cost wise, they may be talking about that because of all the tax benefits, production credits in the U.S. You got to be careful about how they word things when they say that. He may be saying, "Oh, it's cost competitive by the end of this year," maybe including all those and including the EV rebate to consumers. So it's just a critical part of
their automotive business and maybe even energy. So, yeah.
Mohit.
Hey, thanks for letting me speak. I just had a quick question for Grant or any other Tesla bears. Grant, have you ever driven Tesla FSD for more than a few hours? And if yes, what is your honest opinion on that product?
I've used it for 40 minutes, so I guess I'm not qualified to answer the question.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. You should try it. Just you should
I
try.
have. It's. I did not find it overly impressive, but again, I haven't spent the few hours, so
Cool. Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
free to discard my opinion, as I'm sure you will.
No, I will not discard it, but thank you for the honest answer here.
Yeah, I mean, I know people think that unless you try the product or the service, your opinion doesn't matter. But I don't subscribe to that view. I think the data speaks for itself.
I do agree with you, but it's one of those things where we have spent our lives sitting in cars, driving, trying to balance texting versus driving, literally, all your adult life. And the first time you spend a few hours with FSD, you end up realizing this is never going to be the same. You're never going back to driving again, and it just keeps getting better every time. I only started using this a year ago, so I don't know how frustrating it was before then. I'm sure it was extremely bad, but nowadays, sometimes it can go on for 3 hours without me interventing at all, and that's something I think people need to experience a little bit. Just spend 4 hours with freeway and city traffic, and then I don't know, have that experience once. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not worth it. I think that FSD is a very important software. I think that it increases safety as long as it's supervised by a human. Tesla has data on this. When I'm in a Tesla, I use it for 99% of my miles. In Austin, it does a great job. Having said that, we have Elias on the board who has created TeslaFSDTracker.com, and he presents lots of data, crowdsourced data on FSD, and you can go through the screens and look at where it messes up, how it's progressed from version to version, not only major updates but also minor updates as well, the dot updates as well. Elias does a great job, and we have Machine on the board who is a data scientist, and we discussed this data over the years in very detailed manner. And I also know from my previous job that some of the investors that are best at long-term investing, they intentionally, um, try to avoid personal experience with either the management or product or the service. And it's played out. I mean, this is anecdotal, but so I get that. I think people should buy FSD. They should subscribe to FSD primarily for safety purposes, also for convenience purposes. But to say that somebody's opinion doesn't matter, like to come up here and ask Grant, have you tried it? So what if he has tried it, if he hasn't tried it? And I know I disagree with most of the bulls on this, but maybe Omar can speak to it a little bit, and now we'll go to Grant.
I mean, I don't think you have to use it to see the value or have an opinion necessarily. But obviously, the more time you spend with it, the more experience you have. I mean, Yaman obviously doesn't have a Tesla, but he's spent some time trying it. I think that's probably made him better informed. Sometimes with products that are so new, it is kind of um, a little bit difficult to understand just by reading about it or looking at videos about it. So I do think there's value to having experience in person, but also agree that it doesn't mean that you have, no valid opinion or thoughts if you haven't spent a lot of time with it.
Grant?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Yaman, I agree with what you're saying. I think that it's best to be guided by the data. So even before I jumped in the car to do that, I think, my expectation was that I was really curious to see how it looked and how it handled, but I wasn't going to be blown away if it was perfect, or honestly just telling myself that it was horrible if it didn't do a good job and I was intervening every half mile. I mean, the data that Elias has pulled together, I think, is the best objective source of truth on how the system is performing right now. So that's really how I try to ground my analysis of the tech. And I think that's probably, to your point, the best way to do it. I want to briefly just address a couple things that Mohit, I think it was you said. I mean, at the end of the day, this is still technology that you are using to drive the car, like you are driving. You referenced texting, and at least in California, I don't think it's legal to be texting when you're using this. You're not allowed to text and drive in California, regardless of whether you have FSD or not. And I'm not trying to highlight it, but there's a picture that went around in the last 24 hours of another Tesla kind of piled into the back of a truck that looked pretty horrific. So would just advise everyone to please not perceive these cars as driving you. They don't, according to the L2 designation. And please don't text and drive. There are people who died using Tesla products because they're not paying attention.
Machine.
Yeah, also on that note, please stop watching porn while you're on autopilot. All of you.
What is going on here?
I didn't swear.
Let's switch. I think it's time to switch topics. Maybe sounds like it's time to switch topics. Omar, first of all, you have your hand up. Maybe comment, and then Ilya started a new company. I'm wondering your thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great example of how the data doesn't tell the whole story. You can say, oh, well, it's designated level 2 and sort of just dismiss it. But I mean, you have to supervise it, of course. I think that's obvious to everybody. You can't use your phone. The driver monitoring system's so strict. But it is really doing the entire drive for you. So, yes, it is level 2, but to say that it's just level 2, I think is missing the nuance to the story that it's doing what no level 2 system has ever done, and doing complete drives entirely on its own, hands-free, without any intervention. And then, I think when the bears bring up distracted driving and say, "Oh, you're going to crash, pay attention. This is so terrible." I think the reality that people are missing is that nobody's paying more attention to the road than an FSD driver, especially with this latest update 12.4 where they've taken away the steering wheel nag. You can't even look away for a few seconds without the thing saying, "Hey, pay attention to the road." As opposed to manual driving, people are using their phone all the time. So this fake moral outrage at FSD users who aren't paying attention to the road is completely misplaced, I think. These users are going to be watching the road like nobody else, especially with 12.4. And the real issue is actually all the people who are driving manually and using their phone freely every day.
We're going to switch topics, and then maybe we'll get back to this later on, but I'm going to move on. Omar, first of all, what did you think of Ilya's new startup?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. A lot of people speculating about what Ilya Sutskever might do after leaving OpenAI. Definitely lots of effort to recruit him by other companies. But it looks like he's gone and he started his own AI firm. Not surprising that he was able to find the funding to do his own firm. And now he doesn't have to ask Sam Altman for GPUs. He can just buy them himself and allocate them himself as he sees fit. So it seems like a great move for him. I love the simplicity. It's just safe superintelligence incorporated. Really getting back to why OpenAI was started, right? OpenAI was started because of really Elon starting to talk about the dangers of AGI and the importance of making sure it's developed safely. And over time, they've strayed from that mission. They've really now become, with Sam Altman, the head of Y Combinator, the famous Silicon Valley startup accelerator, taking over, they've really become much more of a product company with much more of an emphasis on generating profit in the for-profit arm through their API and through their ChatGPT subscriptions, and just trying to make that a great product. And Ilya and Jen Lakey and many others have sort of said, hey, this isn't what the nonprofit OpenAI was about. We are now prioritizing product over safety. And that's exactly what we were founded to try and reverse, right? Going against Google at the time, which was seen as being more focused on product than safety. So they got a really cool website. It's I think SSI.ai or something, or SSI.inc. And it's really simple design, just a piece of text from them, and they have a very simple mission: building safe super intelligence. So I think OpenAI mission is like making AI accessible for everyone or something. They really believe in like offering it for free. XAI has kind of, I think, like a scientific mission, like, discover the meaning of the universe or something like that using AI. So they're kind of taking that approach of, can we make these things good at reasoning, planning scientific work? And he's really focused on the safety issue. How do we make super intelligence safe? So I think it's great. I'm happy for him and excited to see what comes out of the company. But he's obviously a legend, so maybe they won't really be competitive. It's one player in a very crowded field of AI companies. But I could see him really being able to attract a stellar team and doing some pretty pivotal research in advancing our ability to build these models safely.
Thanks, Omar. We have a question coming up about Optimus. Peter had a good question and the replies. Let's see. Peter, would you like to ask the question?
Hi, guys. Thanks for letting me bring up a question. I wonder if you think it's a possibility for Optimus to manufacture Optimus. Would be nice to hear what you have to say about it. Thank you.
Omar, people have talked before about Optimus building itself at some point, turning into a super exponential increase in production, as Machine would put it. Do you think this is possible? If so, when?
I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't be possible in theory. If you have a working humanoid robot, it should be able to do any task a human can do, operate any machine, do any part or process the human is doing. As a matter of fact, Tesla already has a video, like one of the first Optimus videos they showed was an Optimus attaching an arm to another Optimus. So, I mean, it's not crazy at all. If Optimus is successful and you're able to produce a lot of them, then the cost of producing a marginal Optimus unit falls because your labor cost falls.
Machine, what do you think?
I think we need an AI to filter all the questions so we don't have any repeat questions, and we can condense down the space from 2 hours, 365 days a year, to probably 10 hours total, a whole year. Anyways, we talked about that. There's many robots building many things in the world already, including cars. Optimus is just a more complicated one because it has to learn to balance. Once it learns to do that, there's no reason it couldn't be part of a production line like other robots.
Do you think it would be an efficient way of building Optimus though, instead of stationary equipment, purpose-built stationary equipment?
No, there's probably very little need for Optimus on the Optimus line. I mean, I'm not a manufacturing engineer, but just from the sheer small size.
Well, that hasn't stopped you.
I know.
Being an expert hasn't stopped you expressing your opinion on other topics.
I have good common sense, so that's what the space needs. I would say for a car, there's some very specific aspects of the ergonomic issues for humans, in which if you can put an Optimus in there and reduce the risk, that makes sense. Then there's that's you're not going to have that with Optimus, but you may have things with some of the manufacturing of the material that could be dangerous, or something that you don't want a human involved, that you would still want an Optimus. But the actual putting together the robot, I would think you'd want cheap, fixed, armed KUKA robots or something, unless they're too expensive, unless somehow they make Optimus cheaper to make, which seems unlikely, than these fixed robots, but who knows?
Hi, can you stay for 1 second? So we're going to switch to Michael Dell's tweet in a second, but Lucia, go ahead first. Lucia, what's your question?
Hello, thanks for letting me speak. I wanted to say that, in my opinion, with the new compensation of Elon, we will know the most precise timeline for the new products, since his compensation will likely be tied to their delivery.
Okay, thanks. Machine, did you actually watch the shareholder meeting?
No, I just saw some snippets, like your friend Michael.
Okay, well, let me tell you one section that I thought was interesting. The discussion around hardware 3, 4, and 5. So Elon reiterated on stage that right now they're training on hardware 3, training for hardware 3. They're not using any capabilities of hardware 4. Hardware 4 vehicles are running hardware 3 capable FSD. And he said they're going to build the south end of Giga Texas. They're going to build a data center in the south extension of Giga Texas, specifically for training for hardware 4. Let's start with Omar, since you probably don't have an opinion because you haven't done the work or the experience or the knowledge base. Maybe Omar can talk and you can copy what he says.
So the questions about hardware 3 and hardware 4, a hardware 4 model?
Elon on stage said they're building the south extension of Giga Texas to train specifically for hardware 4. So I guess hardware 4, what do you think of that comment, first of all?
Well, I think it's really exciting that they're going to start training hardware 4 models. It's interesting that he, for the first time, tied the construction of the Giga Texas extension and the 50,000 GPUs they're adding there to the training of a hardware 4 model. And that the California data center would be used to train the hardware 3 model, and the Texas data center would be used to train the hardware 4 model. It probably does require more computational power to train the hardware 4 model because of the higher resolution of the cameras and the increased processing power of the computer. So they're actually putting 20,000 hardware 4 computers in there as part of the training loop. And they're, I think it's about 30,000 or 35,000 in the California facility. So the 50,000 they're going to be putting in Texas is, quite a bit larger, and that should support the additional performance needs of training a hardware 4 specific model. So not only are they, I imagine that it's going to be a bigger model, more parameters, but I imagine that the source data is also going to be higher resolution, and it's going to be operating at that higher resolution. So it should be a big leap over what the hardware 3 models can do, hopefully. Otherwise, what was the point of even building the hardware 4 computer? And I think hardware 5 will be even better than that. So I'm excited for them to get the data center up and for them to start shipping hardware 4 specific models. I think it should lead to another increase in miles per intervention that's noticeable. I imagine the additional detail and higher resolution cameras, as well as the additional processing power on the computer that can support a larger model, should be helpful in continuing to drive down interventions.
Machine, what do you think of the comments? And do you think this means hardware 4 capabilities will not be used until that self-end extension is built?
First, I want to say I agree with most of Omar's comments, and which is kind of disgusting feeling, but you know, it's okay. It's okay once in a while. One thing he'll disagree with is some part of my take. The reason is that they're using this compute for the hardware 3 based model in Palo Alto or wherever it is, and they're not going to start training hardware 4 on there. It's just going to take up too much time and compute time, and they can just port the hardware 3 based model into hardware 4 for now. And so it makes sense to have a new facility to train hardware 4 specific. And I agree with Omar that because hardware 4 has more memory, more compute, higher resolution cameras, it should in theory perform better with a properly trained model than hardware 3. Same thing's going to happen with hardware 5. They're going to have to build a facility probably to train hardware 5, which is maybe going to have even higher resolution cameras, or at least have more compute memory, and allow a larger model. And as we know, larger models with more parameters can be more accurate. And we're talking about one of the most challenging problems, machine learning problems in the world in terms of reliability. And it's going to take high performance models. And probably you're going to find out that you're going to reach robotaxi level reliability with hardware 5 first, before hardware 4 gets there and before hardware 3, if it ever does get there. And so really what this says, which people are missing, is as a consumer, you should probably wait until you buy a vehicle with hardware 5 if you really believe your car is going to turn into a robotaxi. From an investor standpoint, all that matters is the robotaxi vehicle that they unveil, that's not really going in production for another year and a half. It's going to have hardware 5, and they're going to have a facility to train it. And that's the real target from an investor standpoint.
Omar, what do you say? What do you say to machine if you just advise people to not buy Teslas until 2026?
I mean, even the hardware 3 cars are really good. So even if you buy a used, let's say 2018 or 2019 car with hardware 3, right now it's going to run the latest and greatest model that they have available. So honestly, you don't really need to worry too much about what hardware your car has. Obviously, go with the later generation if you have a choice, if you're buying used or something. But right now, anything hardware 3 up is pretty good. And people change cars, right? They don't keep cars forever. So you buy a hardware 3 car today, in let's say 2-3 years, you buy another car, it'll be a hardware 5 car, or maybe a hardware 4 car, and you'll just continue to get better and better, right? You don't worry too much about whether you have an iPhone 14 or an iPhone 15 or an iPhone 16. And I don't think you really need to worry about it too much with your Tesla either. Obviously, get the newer one if you can, but all of them can run FSD and all of them are going to run it great.
I know Machine has a lot of thoughts. He likes to listen to himself talk. And I know we got to talk about Dell and NVIDIA announcement, building a Memphis supercomputer, teaming up with Musk and everything. But we have one of our patrons on the board right now, Lance Webb, who got a ticket to tour the factory with Elon in France. And I want to hear about how that went. Lance, welcome.
Hey, how you doing? It was wonderful. Had a good time. Most of the stuff, any insights we got, he pretty much said at the shareholder meeting. He did say, like we basically got a bunch
How
of
many
cyber
people were there with you?
15.
Did you actually get to talk with Elon?
Oh yeah, but it was like everybody was mobbing on top of him, and Franz was kind of hanging in the back. Everybody was ignoring him, and I felt bad. He's like holding the door open for us, and
No
all the
way. Are you
attention's
serious?
on. Yeah, I hung back and talked with him a bit.
What did you ask?
Well, mainly I did it. I just talking. I asked Elon a few things, but a lot of things he kind of mentioned at the shareholder meeting. We got in a bunch of Cybertrucks and then literally drove right into the factory where they're near the south end where the servers are. And well, there are no more servers there yet, but it's all just the cooling and the piping and everything is all ready to go, and they're starting to build a deck. And they had one server rack way over in the far corner they were testing with, and all the power coming into it. And he said it was only going to be, I guess, that southeast side of it, and there are going to be offices on the other side for now. He mentioned 50,000, and then he said 100,000, and then he said up to 150,000 NVIDIA clusters over there. And then he did say Dojo would be coming there next year.
That's good to know. Thank you. Yeah, that is good to know.
Just on the direct other side of the server side is where the tunnel was that they just completed, and they were still pulling dirt out of there. And I did mention, they're working on getting the cameras calibrated coming out of the factory. I said, well, why don't they just drive the truck, have it drive itself over there and park itself on the other side of the interstate, because it's going underneath the interstate. And he said, yeah, that's the plan. So they would just drive off the line themselves and then park in the lots over there. I thought that was kind of neat.
Any questions for Lance about his tour with Elon and Franz? Please request to speak. Omar, what do you think of that comment that Dojo is coming to that south extension next year?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I would imagine it's probably the Dojo 2 or the Dojo 1.5, and not just a copy paste of the system they have in California right now. So, I mean, it really speaks to the state of Dojo. When Dojo is a success, they won't be buying and building new NVIDIA data centers. The fact that they're getting the NVIDIA stuff up before Dojo, I think, obviously speaks volumes. The NVIDIA is what they're using in production to produce these models today.
Hey, one other thing I thought was kind of interesting. Y'all were talking about Optimus, and in Palo Alto, they're doing all that, and that probably 1,000 of them, they probably are going to build over here. But I did ask them, when they start mass producing, it kind of makes sense for them to be in Texas. And I said, so is Optimus going to be Texan? And he said, yeah, they plan on building the factory there, but not in that building. Another on site in another building.
Can you repeat that, Lance?
He said the Optimus mass production would be in Austin, but in a different building, not in the Gigafactory there. That was the
Interesting.
plan.
Okay, so we'll be on the lookout for additional building going up.
But that 1,000 will probably be in Palo Alto. Yeah, and at the time he said the 2 that were working were in Fremont, but then he said that in the shareholders meeting, things like that. It was funny. A lot of people were asking FSD questions, and he was having to think back, like what versions we were on to try to figure out, and then because he was like, I'm running like 12.5 and 6, so he was trying to think back which ones we were running, and with the problems we were having, and pretty much everything will be resolved. Like even I was complaining about when you should be going slow. I've had twice where it just tried to pass a police officer speeding slightly. And I said, well, how we kind of look ahead and see, okay, there's a cop up here, I need to slow down. I can can't the cameras kind of look for cops out there? And he said, well, actually the Tesla ahead of you will already tell your car you need to slow down because there's a cop up there. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Omar, what do you think of that?
Yeah, he's talked a little bit about the system where cars can communicate with each other on X. It sounds like they're really working on this, and it's something they're going to launch soon.
I thought we talked about this before, and the consensus was that would not happen due to latency. No? Am I misremembering?
No, I mean, the cars essentially just upload what they see to a server, and that server then is able to send that down to other cars.
Machine.
Yeah, I think you have to distinguish between critical object detection versus nice to knows. And I think we talked that, critical object detection and that sort is not going to be something that's fed into the cloud or communicated. But nice to knows are something where if there's a delay or you don't actually receive the information, the system can still run and operate properly. Then that's okay. And in this case, it's kind of like a crowdsourced map where it's sending information about speed traps or potholes or what have you. And if it's not in perfect real time, it's not a loss. So I think it's pretty cool.
Lenny.
Hey, my question is for Lance. So the fans that Sawyer just posted about, was there giant copper or like stainless steel like tubes like underneath there at all? Like, that's part of the cooling system? It's not just fans. So did you see anything about the cooling system with that?
Yeah, you could see everything. I mean, they had pipes that were 10 feet across that were coming into that thing. They were crazy, maybe 8 feet. And then they had it all going out. You could see where it was coming through the floor and going up to each rack. They had all those already plumbed, ready to go. But it was a long way off from actually getting servers in there. Because all I saw was that one little lonely black rack off in the background. They kind of looked like things we saw from Dell today, but it was just a rack.
Any other questions for Lance about his tour with Elon and Franz? Please request to speak. Big D, go ahead.
Hello. I had a question about the cooling system that was in. Do they plan on capturing any of the heat like a geothermal plant and using that to operate turbines to like generate energy? Is there any way to reuse that heat, in other words?
Michelle?
Well, one of the data centers I worked on here in Quebec has an adjacent hydroponic plant, and they capture that heat to heat up the plants in the winter that are kind of inside the glass building. And this is something that was talked about in Master Plan Part 3. At an industrial scale, you want a closed loop system for energy, and that includes heat within a manufacturing environment.
I didn't get any information on that. I did know that they said that they're gathering all that rainwater on the roof and they use it for other purposes, but I'm not sure about the heat.
Specifically about Austin, not from what we've seen in the drone videos, but like they're putting in a standard design, but it's at a scale we've rarely seen that publicly. Usually, we don't see drone videos of other data centers being built. It's a really more secretive endeavor usually, but it's a top to bottom airflow where these big fans are going to push air through the server rooms, and then heat goes up. At that point, capturing it, unless you really have an immediate need for it, it's not like there's efficiency gain losses to try and capture this versus if you have plenty of energy available, it's not usually really worth it.
Thank you, Michelle. Marty T in the replies talks about Justin Timberlake since he's driving a Tesla so that he won't be running red lights and swerve in his lane. Machine. I guess that applies to you too. You should get a hardware 3 and start using FSD.
Well, I don't run red lights, but I do like Justin Timberlake. I used to dance to his music a long time ago.
Let's see. Omar, what do you think about Michael Dell's announcement?
Yeah, pretty exciting. I mean, he's an FSD user, so I think he's a great partner to help him build a data center. They've also got a pretty great financing division for purchases, so I think yeah, they're really growing as a player in the data center market.
NVIDIA announced that they didn't announce, according to the information reportedly, NVIDIA plans to design server racks for its upcoming GB200 flagship AI chips, a job that server designers such as Dell, HP, and Supermicro have long handled. Is NVIDIA starting to compete with their suppliers, with their partners, do you think? Omar?
Sorry, what did you say about NVIDIA?
I pinned at the top the Inner Circle Trading Group. According to information, NVIDIA reportedly planning to design server rack for its upcoming GB200 flagship. It sounds like they're going vertical integration, a job that server designers such as Dell, HP, and Supermicro have long handled.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Why leave any part of the market to those other players?
Machine, let's focus on about used Tesla values. Did you see the post I was telling you about?
I did, and it looks like
What do
you're
you think about
pretty
Model
right.
3 resale values? Yeah.
I had looked like a week or two ago and saw the beginning, a bit of a little downtrend, but it wasn't enough data to say. But looking at it now, I mean, you're definitely right. There's been like a $400 decrease over the last few weeks, and that's yeah, outside of the noise, that's significant. So not looking good for our bet by the end of the year, which I don't remember exactly, but I believe it was that the price would be higher at the end of the year than it was when we made
Right.
it. So um, yeah, I mean, seasonality definitely it could be part of it. But you know, if there's a recession or impending pressure, I just thought that a lot of those factors was already being seen in the downward pressure on EV prices, but for the last year and a half. But I guess you could definitely be right that it continues to get worse. Yeah, that's problematic.
You know, I do offer a 10% discount for early settlement of confidence. If you want, if you're convinced that I'm going to be right, you can send me $450 for the $5.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
Highlander.
Just enjoying the conversation with a bunch of my friends. I want to say sorry to Sherry. We were big in the Muskegon Tesla event, and we missed each other. But it was one of the most family-friendly. Not just Tesla. Everybody was welcome. It was just such a nice blessing of a weekend. And I'm going to put my little submarine to the pier on that one. Thank you for asking.
All right. Machine, are you net long or net short as of right now?
I really don't have much right now. I have a small. I mean, I guess I'm net long, but I have a very small amount right now. I'm just uncertain. I have a small outside of my old shares. I just have a small iron condor trade right now where I'm basically betting it's not going to move too
We know
much.
you have a very small one.
Hey, no one asked you.
Thank you. Michelle has been promoted to permanent speaker mode based on that.
I can't really respect anyone who exercises to go to McDonald's. It's disgusting.
So, Machine, based on what you're seeing on car moves now, are you revising your forecast for deliveries or profits or share?
I mean, it's too soon to tell, but if that trend continues, then they're going to have to offer the low APR financing for longer, which is going to reduce margins a bit more. And the automotive business, basically, if the used car, basically my thinking is if the used car prices keep going down, then for that quarter, the margins for the new cars basically are going to be down. And so it seems like sequentially, outside of delivering more vehicles this quarter, which obviously should be a boost, it seems like the prices that they're sold at might be in aggregate a little lower than before. But I think we may see, I think for Q2 it's okay. This effect may be seen more in Q3. I don't know. So I'm thinking automotive earnings are not really going to be going up. And then you have to think about, are they going to sacrifice volume for keeping higher margins like they have been? And it seems like Musk is saying that they're still going to produce or deliver over 1.8 million cars this year, which if you take out the first 2 quarters, I think those net out to about 800,000 deliveries, that they're going to deliver 1 million in the last 2 quarters, which is a big increase versus the first 2. So, you'd have to do something like 450 and 550, and some of that will come from Cybertruck, but not. He said, by the end of the year, they probably do 2,500 Cybertrucks a week.
Right.
So, maybe in
Seems
Q4.
very low, don't you think? I mean, if they're already at 1,300.
Of course, we were hoping for higher last year, right? Modeling out what's going to happen in 2024. You, of course, had some absolutely obnoxious predictions, something like 1 million run rate, or even 1 million in 2024. I don't know. It was just a joke. But I think we're still hoping for maybe getting to that 5,000 per week, and they're going to get half that. So maybe you do 2,000 per week in Q4. So you're talking about like 25,000 vehicles in Q4 for Cybertruck, and in Q3 maybe it's like 15 to 20. So I think that in aggregate adds another 40 to 50,000 vehicles in the back half. So they still have to produce from SX, Y, and 3, at least 50,000 more vehicles and deliver them more than they did in the first 2 quarters. And who's going to buy those? Are they going to buy it at a higher price or a lower price than they did in Q2? And based on used car trends, I don't know. It seems like that may be hard to do and keep margins flat or higher.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think the 460 production ramp is the obvious limiting factor for Cybertruck, and it's a slower ramp than even the Model 3 ramp, the original Model 3 ramp. Which is kind of surprising, but it's a great product, obviously in high demand, and they're profitable, and we'll see how it shapes up. It's hard to say at this point what the steady state demand rate is going to be for the Cybertruck, but I think it's surprising to the upside. Lance?
Well, you said 1,300 has happened once, and it's as fast as the slowest part. And I was pretty surprised on how many humans were on the line there. I still think it's a pretty slow ramp. I don't know, just trying to be realistic on those numbers.
Machine?
Yeah, this whole 1,300, I don't know, people get really optimistic from some drone videos. But if you looked at the VIN production rate from Troy, it's pretty clear it's kind of 1,000 or a little bit less, and kind of flatlined right now. So yeah, it does seem like they would have to at least 2x production to get to that end year goal. And yeah, we don't know what the flattening, what's the reason for it to be flattening, but 4680 would make sense to be a limiting factor.
Lance, any other takeaways from your? I really would love to. Like, can you make us kind of feel like we were there? Tell us about it. Just kind of like, tell us everything.
Well, somebody had an opportunity to go. But I wish I had more. I had the memories, and there was a guy filming and taking pictures, and I sent an email asking if we could get some of those. So I'm hoping to get some pictures or video they took during the tour. But it was an incredible experience, but it was fast. Other people on the tours, everyone got a tour that was there, but it was like a 25-minute tour, and we were with them like over an hour. I didn't see any battery stuff at all. It did seem like there were entire sections of the factory that were blocked off. So who knows what's going on behind over there. He walks incredibly fast. It's hard to even keep up.
Elon walks fast?
Oh God, yeah. And I kind of jokingly was talking to the guy next to me at the time that was trying to blend in. I told him, I know you're trying to blend in, but does he always walk this fast? Because he was obviously one of his bodyguards. And he said, yeah, all the time. He is always on the move. But it was incredible. I enjoyed it.
Machine.
Lance, I think you're going to regret the fact that you basically made Franz hold the door open for everyone. I mean, that's embarrassing. Where's your Southern hospitality?
I did feel bad, but he doesn't get the attention like he wanted. I never really dawned on me until seeing that in action.
Braxton. Braxton, you unmute yourself and ask a question. Y6.
Hey, Yaman, what's happening, man?
Nothing much. Welcome.
Thank you. Just wanted to report from the ground here in Memphis, Tennessee, home of the world's largest supercomputer and Elvis Presley. I've got a little information for you guys. I don't know if you'd be interested, but I've learned a little bit about the power and water demands for XAI's new facility here, and can just share that with the group if that's fine.
Sure.
So Memphis Light, Gas, and Water is kind of the main company that does all this here in Memphis. And they put out about 3,300 megawatts a day. That's peak capacity, not including peaker plants. So that's once you exceed 3,300 megawatts, you got to turn on the peaker plants or maybe in the future batteries. This is going to add 150 megawatts per day to the demand. So it's about a 5% increase in demand, which won't be an issue again unless they exceed the peak. You can need to fire up peaker plants and get batteries later on. So that's 150 megawatts a day is the number. And then the second thing is 1.3 million gallons of water a day is needed to cool the computers. And that's a pretty significant. It sounds like a lot of water, but Memphis has some of the best water in the country. It's sitting on top of 2 aquifers, and it's the source of all the water here. And if you come to Memphis, Tennessee, the water, you can, I don't drink it out of the tap, but you know what I mean. It's really good. So there's a little bit of controversy, if you can imagine, around the city's water supply, utilizing the aquifers, and then lastly, they're going to hope to change that to some kind of recycled water plant as they spin those up here in the future. But that's kind of the short story of what's going on.
Thank you, Wes. Hollis replied and called you out and said, Wes doesn't sound like it's from Memphis. What do you say to that?
He's right. I've moved all over.
True, but he does have a last name that makes sense from Memphis.
Thanks, brother.
I think funny that you said, did you say you don't drink the water from the faucet?
Yeah, I don't drink out of the tap. I mean, I run through a filter. Yeah.
I mean, think about this. This is just all such the epitome here of everything going wrong. We are trying to tackle these climate crises around the world, global warming, water loss around the world, plastic. And here we have Wes
touting a big compute center that's going to consume all this electricity and water to probably just generate porn content. And he's drinking from plastic bottles.
We have 13 minutes left, and we have to speak on the board. David?
Hi, question for Lance. Did someone ask about the next gen platform? I mean, what part of the factory is going to build? And did you guys saw anything like the production line or something?
Lance, I think that's unboxed, maybe.
Yeah, everyone there was asking questions about it, but he was very tight-lipped about that. So I think that's an obvious thing. I just noticed that there was a lot of sections that were just kind of blocked off. So I'm thinking there was something over there I could try to look through. Couldn't really see anything. But yeah, we saw a lot of the factory, but a lot of it we didn't. So we shall find out.
Niraj.
Hey, so I just wanted to respond to the question about giving a few details from the factory tour. I had the opportunity to attend, and right as you walk into the door, on your left side, there was such a big Cybertruck battery. It just did not look like that battery could fit inside the Cybertruck. Like, I even asked the person who was giving us the tour, and he said, yeah, that is the real Cybertruck battery. It just looked so much bigger in person. And it was revolving on an axis, and right in front of that, there were two Giga castings, one for the front and one for the rear. The front Giga casting did not look as, I should say, like refined, but the rear Giga casting was much more refined, had many ribs, if you know what I mean, in the Giga casting. And one thing that I noticed that was different to the Model Y production line was that the Cybertrucks, as they were being made, they were on these autonomous vehicles that Tesla has like traditionally used fully to like transport materials. Like, it's one of those vehicles that follows the magnetic tape on the floor. So that was very interesting to see that the Cybertruck, as it was being built, was being transported within the factory on those vehicles. So that leads me to think that they're still working on the Cybertruck production line, like it's not finalized yet. So that could be a point towards ramping the Cybertruck production. Those are a few things that I remember from the factory tour. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Niraj. Any questions for Lance, who went to the tour with Elon and Franz and also Niraj? Please request to speak and ask your question. We have 10 minutes. 10 minute warning.
Oh yeah, so today I actually ended up reading a think tank survey, and they were saying that approximately 70% of, this is news related to the tariffs from China. They were saying that 70% of batteries that were in EVs sold in Q1 came from China. So we will see that effect on margins as well for other automakers. Tesla, not so much for the US production, but mainly for Rivian, Ford, and GM and everyone else.
Thank you for your flexibility. Michelle, do you have any comments on the Dell announcement that they're building in Memphis data center to train Grok for Tesla?
I think when Tesla last winter was putting together lots of GPUs, and then Elon tweeted like, "Hey, it's finally back up." I wasn't putting emphasis on how much work that is, and I think having lived through this, and on the flip side, there's this on how much work that is. And I think having lived through this, and on the flip side, there's like these guys, you give them the contract to do it, and they're gonna do it like a white glove service. they flying in a team. That's all they do, and then they go to the next data center. They're gonna be way more efficient. And like the trend in the industry is going with these MSCs, these like modular system components, where it's Lego blocks and like how many racks you want, and then everything fits, clicks together, and it's even faster to spin up these data centers. Now the craze is all about GPUs, but yeah, employees focus on other things than clipping servers together.
Thank you, Michelle. Machine.
Well, I wanted to ask Neeraj, I don't know if he's not a speaker anymore. It says on his profile that he's mastering video in to control out, which sounds like Robotaxi. Is he saying he's working on this or he's just interested in it?
I'm nowhere near an expert, so I'm just like trying to understand. My background is in mechanical engineering, and I've been a fan of Tesla since I've been a student in the Bay Area. But to answer your question, no, I'm just still learning, but eventually I will be working at Tesla. But I had a question for Omar.
What do you mean you will be working at Tesla?
I do see myself working on the Optimus team.
Okay, so
in
you're
the
gonna
next
apply.
2 years. Yeah, I will.
Okay, go ahead.
I had a question for Omar because one thing that frustrated me while I was attending the shareholder meeting was the fact that the questions were so stupid. And I feel like that's personally disrespecting Elon's valuable time. So I really want Omar to use his influence to kind of push forward the idea of upvoting questions from the community so that we can have quality questions in the next shareholder meeting.
I agree. Please vet them first.
Yeah, I think they're doing some vetting apparently, but not enough clearly. Machine.
I think the community should rally around having me just ask all the questions. You can send me your
Complexity.
questions.
Yeah, so the survey, the think tank research I was talking about earlier, they also covered mining, and specifically, given the current macro circumstances in the US, they are saying that over the next 2 years, while the commodity prices will continue to fall by 2025 for lithium, nickel, and everything, they're saying that after 2025, we will see an inflection point, at which point the prices will start to spike because of the high interest rate environment. We aren't getting any exploration of new mines in the US region specifically, with the exception of copper. So that will be also a big catalyst for losses for other automakers dependent on supply chains from outside.
Thank you. Omar, we have a question for you in the replies. Does anyone know if NAG-free works on the highway or is it only on city street?
Yeah, it works on both highways and city streets.
Okay, great. Lance, any other kind of like tidbits that you can share that we wouldn't know if we, unless it, like, for example, like you said, Elon walks fast, like something like that.
I wish I could have took it all in more. It was a lot going on all at once. An hour seems like a long time, but I could have spent all day just getting to look around. You were trying to keep up with him, and if you took too much time looking, you were get left behind. Most of the insights that I thought I had, a lot of those
Why
were
would you
talking
even
about
look around? If you're walking with Elon for an hour, why would you even like take your eyes off of him?
everybody's asking questions, and you got to get really close to even hear what's going on. But yeah, it was a free for all. It wasn't like a president from another country or a dictator getting a tour. It was 15 was still a lot.
Niraj.
One information that I would like to add is the fact that the people who are giving us the tour, they seemed very passionate about working there. And even as we were walking through the factory, some employees were like, "Why are you looking at us?" But some of the others were like very welcoming and like they seemed pretty happy. And I know this is a one-off
Were you
instance.
were you at the tour with Elon and Franz, or just the general tour?
No, just a general tour.
Yeah, there's a 25-minute for anybody that was there as a shareholder. But everybody
Yeah.
seemed happy. I mean, maybe it was because I was walking with Elon, but everybody seemed happy. Good spirits.
Yeah. All right. Did anybody ask any good questions that you can remember on that tour? Lance?
I wish I could record everything was going on, but
Did you just
I think I
tune
brought
out? Did you like
No, I didn't
literally
tune
get into
out,
like a
no.
different? Did you like
No.
literally get into a different zone and you just don't remember anything?
It kind of feels like that now, but no.
Yeah, I guess so.
Wasted ticket, huh? No.
No. Well, I'm
I pretty
glad you
much told
enjoyed it.
everything.
Did you take a selfie?
We weren't allowed to film anything. I bought one of those pocket DJI cameras, and then like, nope, couldn't bring anything at all in there. So I'm hoping to get some video and images because they took pictures of us all together and everything, but all I got was a little bracelet wristband that had red birthday balloons on it to get in the tour. That's all I got. I didn't get any special, like the Cybertruck event.
Well, if you remember anything later, please come up and share with us any sort of details, tidbits, questions, answers, or something you noticed about either Elon or the factory. You're more than welcome to request to speak again.
Sure,
tomorrow.
I've noticed when y'all are talking, I've thought of other things too. Yeah, so I'll keep on it.
Yeah, exactly. Niraj?
So two things. The first, they had a shuttle from the entrance to the factory, and I was the last person to get on our shuttle. And as I walk in, I see Rob Maher sitting in the bus, and I was just so excited. All I could say was like, "Thank you, Rob Maher from Tesla Daily," and it was great. And the second thing, I was fortunate enough to get a selfie with Kimball Musk as he was walking out, and he was really nice as well. So yeah,
Machine.
Thanks.
Yeah, question for Lance, really important. Has Elon's mantis gotten smaller or bigger?
Tesla Transport.
Yeah, hey guys. I was wondering for anyone who's on the factory tour, I think I read sometime last week after the shareholder meeting, Cybertruck production was about 1,250 models a week, running on a 10-hour shift on a single line. Just wondering, I know there's some conversation earlier about 4680, maybe being the bottleneck there, but wondering if there's any other insights there. I think that they targeted 1,500. They're targeting 1,500 a week in the short term.
Lance, can you answer
that? Well, it was 1,300 when we were there, but he said that was like the week before, and it's not a consistent 1,300. And it did seem there were Cybertrucks on both sides going, but I don't know if that's necessarily multiple lines because they were going through different processes on there. So I would say it's probably still one line, but I'm not sure.
Right. Any final thoughts? It is 4 o'clock. This space has been going on for 2 hours. We're trying to limit everything to 2 hours these days. We're doing a good job. Really happy with how this space is shaping up. Yesterday, we had a record day with 30,000 listeners of the space, which is incredible. And thank you very much for all the speakers who come up here every day. Omar, thank you. Michelle does a great job answering questions, moderating YouTube Live as well, and everybody else who, the only person I don't want to thank is Machine, because if it wasn't for Machine, we would probably have 40,000 listeners. But all these Yo Mama jokes reduce listenership. And on that note, thank you very much, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.